Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be diving into this material with you today because we're looking at the work of a true master architect of human thought, St. Thomas Aquinas. In his absolutely massive, world-changing text, the Summa Theologica, Aquinas did something incredible. He essentially drafted a complete blueprint of the human spiritual condition. So today, we're going to look specifically at how he maps out the very real, very tangible differences in how grace operates in our lives, drawing directly from Cachitan Cuddy's The Summa Illuminated. Let's get into it.
To set the stage here, Aquinas throws this fascinating core mystery right at us. He writes, after treating individually of all the virtues, we must now consider those things which pertain especially to certain men. Think about that for a second. If every single one of us is supposed to pursue a life of virtue, why do our spiritual lives, our callings, and our abilities look so vastly different? Like, why do some people seem to have these extraordinary spiritual gifts, while others just live out quietly heroic lives of everyday service?
Well, here's our game plan to navigate this brilliant medieval theology. 1. A blueprint of grace. 2. Gifts for the greater good. 3. Action versus contemplation. And 4. The pursuit of perfection. We've got a clear path, so let's get moving.
Starting right off with Section 1, a blueprint of grace, understanding the triple difference.
Okay, so Aquinas actually solves this mystery of our totally divergent spiritual paths by laying out a highly specific framework. He doesn't just wave his hands and say, well, everyone's different and that's fine. No, he categorizes exactly how and why we differ under the influence of grace, using what he calls the triple difference. He breaks down all these variations in human habits and actions into 3 distinct areas. First, differences in gratuitous graces. Second, the fundamental distinction between the active life and the contemplative life. And third, the various duties and states of life we can enter into. This specific threefold structure basically forms the entire spiritual ecosystem we're about to unpack.
Moving right along to Section 2, Gifts for the Greater Good, Specialized Spiritual Equipment. Now, if you've ever wondered about those spectacular, almost unexplainable spiritual gifts some historical figures seem to just have, this right here is Aquinas' manual for that specialized spiritual equipment. He calls them gratuitous graces. And the crucial point, the thing you really need to take away here, is that these are expressions of the Holy Spirit ordered to the sanctification of others, not the self. This is absolutely vital. Unlike your regular graces, the kind that help you personally grow in holiness and virtue, a gratuitous grace is given to you as a tool. It's meant to help save and sanctify the people around you. It's not about making you better, it's literally about equipping you to help the church.
And Aquinas, being Aquinas, organizes this super dense list of gifts brilliantly. He groups them perfectly into 3 logical categories: knowing, speaking, and doing. Under knowledge, we've got prophecy and rapture. Under speech, the gifts of tongues and words, and under operation, the gift of miracles. It's just a completely systematic, logical way of understanding how divine aid gets injected directly into the world.
Let's zoom in on that knowledge category for a second, specifically prophecy. We kind of need to bust some modern pop culture myths right here. For Aquinas, a prophet is not just a fortune teller gazing into a crystal ball to predict the future. Prophecy is actually a divine light revealing things that are simply far removed from normal human knowledge. Sure, that can mean the future, but it also includes the deepest divine mysteries and hidden spiritual truths. Interestingly enough, Aquinas notes this isn't some stable, permanent habit you just walk around with. It's a transitory impression. It's like a flash of divine light in the soul.
Then we have rapture. And wow, this is an incredibly intense concept. Aquinas defines it as an ecstasy, which literally means a going out of oneself. But rapture adds this certain violence to it. It's a sudden, violent withdrawal of the intellect from normal sensory perception, completely uplifting the person to supernatural things. Aquinas actually uses St. Paul as the prime example here, someone whose mind was forcefully, supernaturally uplifted to perceive realities completely outside of human experience.
So how does this build into speech and operation? Well, it's a chain reaction. Once divine knowledge is received, it needs to be shared with the world, right? First, that happens through the gift of tongues or words, which allows the speaker to instruct the intellect, move people's affections, and really sway listeners. But logically, why should anyone believe them? That is exactly where the gift of miracles comes in. Miracles, performed strictly by God's power, serve to confirm the truth of those spoken words and prove the holiness of the message. The knowledge is spoken, and then the speech is proven by action.
Which brings us to Section 3, Action versus Contemplation, the 2 paths.
This brings us to the second big difference in Aquinas' blueprint, and it tackles that eternal tug-of-war tension we all feel between living deeply in the mind versus living actively out in the world. The contemplative life is completely internal. It's focused heavily on the intellect, on contemplating divine truths, and pertains directly and immediately to the love of God. The active life, on the flip side, is external. It's focused on human things, external moral actions, and is way more directly concerned with the love of our neighbor.
Now, Aquinas, who, remember, was a contemplative Dominican priest himself, he actually ranks these paths. He argues that the contemplative life is more excellent because it utilizes the highest absolute best faculty in humans, which is the intellect. It engages with divine things, whereas the active life engages with human things and external needs. But, and this is a big but, Aquinas was incredibly practical. He readily recognized that in a restricted sense and in particular cases, the active life must be preferred simply because of the urgent, immediate needs of the present world.
But hold on, because here is the ultimate magnificent equalizer: charity. Whether you're spending your days cloistered away in deep intellectual contemplation of the divine, or you're out in the streets literally feeding the poor and tending to the sick, the absolute salvific key that unites both of these paths is charity. It is literally the only way to become a saint, regardless of which path you happen to be walking.
All right, final stretch. Section 4, the pursuit of perfection, commitments and states of life.
Moving beyond our everyday, day-to-day actions, we hit the third difference: permanent, binding commitments in states of life within the church. Now, you might be asking, why have different states of life at all? Why all these different levels of freedom and servitude? Well, Aquinas argues these differences exist for three big reasons: to ensure the church's perfection, to fulfill all the necessary actions required in the world, and to reflect the church's inherent dignity and beauty. These structural differences don't break the unity of the faithful at all. Instead, through faith, charity, and mutual service, they basically interlock to create a beautifully cohesive and functioning whole.
Now, what is really fascinating here is how Aquinas looks at perfection while we're still here on earth. He's realistic. He admits that a constant 24/7 state of perfectly attending to God all the time, that's really only for the saints in heaven. But on earth, we can achieve a type of perfection by actively removing obstacles. Step 1 is avoiding all mortal sins, which is just the baseline necessary for salvation. But step 2 goes further. It's about removing anything and everything that hinders the mind's affections from tending wholly to God. So that naturally brings us to what he formally calls the state of perfection. And we have to clarify a massive misconception here. Entering a state of perfection, like, say, becoming a monk or a nun, does not mean you are suddenly a perfect person. Not at all. It means you are taking a perpetual, solemn vow to tend toward perfection. You are making a binding commitment to literally leave worldly affairs behind so you can freely and fully give yourself over to the pursuit of God.
Within this state of perfection, Aquinas sets up a really interesting hierarchical dynamic. He says, bishops are in the position of perfecters, whereas religious are in the position of being perfected. Basically, bishops take up the pastoral duty. They commit to laying down their lives like shepherds to perfect others. Meanwhile, those in religious orders take up what Aquinas beautifully calls the sweet yoke of consecrated life, dedicating themselves entirely to being perfected. It's a really stunning ecosystem of mutual service. So we've walked through the whole triple difference, from spiritual superpowers to the great debate of action versus contemplation, all the way down to perpetual vows of perfection. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. In your own pursuit of virtue, how does your modern balance of action and contemplation actually map onto Aquinas' 13th century blueprint? Where do you fit into this highly structured, mutually serving spiritual ecosystem today? It's definitely a question worth contemplating or maybe even acting upon. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.